Hey guys, happy Tuesday. So hopping on here for my 25 days of Christmas live series. And today we're going to make a little sign, but I'm also going to kind of go over some, I guess I said painting techniques or tips in the caption, but more distressing options. So I did on the back side of this board, just painted a couple of strips of white paint, and this is just actually ceiling paint, the paint that is pink when you put it on and then it turns white as it dries. That is what I had easy to grab in the shop, and so that's what I am using. And another thing is that when you are using your paint brushes, if you are just going to take a break, go eat lunch, you're going to wait and paint the next day, you can put it in a Ziploc bag, a Walmart bag, saran wrap, and you basically just twist it around. And I got paint everywhere this time, but really you can wrap it and just keep paint on the bristles and not on the whole brush itself. But I just have a nice fat, see if the lighting's gonna get it, but it doesn't look like it. A nice fat brush. It's really thin and it's straight and not angled. So I really like angled brushes when I'm painting furniture and walls, but I'm fine with a straight brush when I'm doing signs. So I took the paint using that brush and I painted these 4 strips. Now, I think the lighting adjusted a little bit. So on this strip, what I did was I let it dry, quite a bit, but not completely. And then I took duct tape and I put duct tape on it. And with the duct tape, it kind of squirted. These lines were nicer. It kind of smushed out the excess paint, so I don't have a straight edge anymore. But it does distress it a little bit. Now, a lot of people like the duct tape technique and they think that it pulls off a lot. I have duct tape brand and it doesn't, for me, remove very much paint. Okay, so we'll see if the light can adjust here. But you can see kind of like the crackling subtly. It's not as much as if you used crackle paint, but it definitely takes off some of that white paint and makes it look distressed. So that is an option of distressing. So basically when you are painting something or a sign and you want it to look old, this is an option that you could do. Another option that I've used before, and I've done actually a video on this technique, is basically once it's starting to dry, I will just wad up a paper towel and wipe it off. When you do that, you have to have your wad of paper towel thinner than your line of paint or your section of paint. Otherwise, you are going to mess up your edges like I did over here on the duct tape. So you just you can start off of the painted spot with your paper towel as long as you don't have any paint on your paper towel, and you start off and then you swipe and then you're going to pull it off before you get to the edge, and then I will just wad up the paper towel, put that wet part inside, and use a dry spot of the paper towel, start off of the bottom or off of the painted spot on the other end, and then work downwards. How much pressure you apply, how many times you go over it is going to determine how much paint you essentially are just wiping off. But this is a good technique. I think the video that I did was on the frame of a mirror, and so it just gives you a distressed look so much easier than using sandpaper. Because you're doing it while it's wet and you're essentially just wiping off the paint, and you don't have to worry about your lines when you're doing something like a picture frame or a mirror or a piece of furniture, because you don't have those lines that you have to worry about like you would if you were painting a sign. Then on this strip, I did just use some fine sandpaper, and I tend to use my sandpaper over and over again, so this has different colored paint on it. But you can see that where I sanded this section, it is now pink. And of course, because I was wanting to show you what can happen, it didn't do it. But what happens to me sometimes when I'm trying to distress a sign, like something that has a border of a different color around it, and I start sanding, then if I sand outside and like got this red, then the little dust particles of red come off and can then change the color of my paint. It didn't do it this time, of course, because I was kind of wanting it to, because I wanted to show you that. So this one is the one where I just use sandpaper. Where it has distressed more, that is where I probably had less paint on to start. So when I'm doing my brush strokes, a couple of spots, I might go over that spot 2 or 3 times just because I'm trying to smooth out my brush strokes. And, you know, other spots might only get hit once. And so when you sand, whatever has less paint on it is going to distress a lot easier because the paint is less layers to come off and less to sand. And then on this last strip, what I did here was probably what I think I like the most when I'm doing a new sign or painting something new, is if you take some Vaseline and you put it in a few spots, then once you paint over that Vaseline, you can do that with spray paint or you can do that with a brush. And then you take your paper towel and kind of the same technique, staying in the paint, you are wiping off the excess Vaseline. And when you do that, it kind of pulls and drags and almost peels up some of the paint around it. And so I like that technique. Now this might be more of a distressed look than you personally like, so then you wouldn't want to pick this technique. I like it to look like it's distressed. And another thing you can do is by painting multiple colors, like here where we have red, if I had painted, let's say turquoise and then done another green in spots, then when I use the Vaseline technique, it's going to be multicolored underneath, which I think I like because it kind of gives a layered look. So those are some different distressing techniques. Duct tape, wet sanding is what they call it when you wipe it off while it's wet, just normal sandpaper, and then using the Vaseline. So a long time ago, I'm going to say probably a couple of years, I stenciled joy on here, and then I went around it with a chalk pen, and the intent was to make a sign, paint a sign, but then it got pushed back into the pile and didn't get done. And then because it says joy, it never got done. And you know, here years later, it still is not done. So we're gonna try and bust this out. All this was a piece of plywood that I had left over from some project. And I go through spurts of not being able to throw away wood. And this was one of those times where I kept a bunch of scraps. And then different things you can do with scraps if they're new pieces. I like to make signs. I don't do it very often because I don't feel that I have the time, but I like doing it. And I forgot that I was going to do the Vaseline technique for this. So it doesn't matter if you do a lot or a little. You just kind of want to think about where would it naturally be distressing. I probably would have done one up here on the top of the J. And I think it's easier to do it when you are using spray paint, because I don't worry about the Vaseline getting on my brush. But they don't like each other, so it doesn't do any damage. So you can kind of do as much or as little of distressing as you like. I just try and pick different areas around the piece to distress, because it's kind of like thinking about art. So you're obviously not going to be able to see what the distressed looks like by the end of this video, but I will post it on my blog, a picture of what it looks like once it has dried, and then I wipe off the Vaseline. So the nice thing about using the white chalk pen as my on the border is just that it makes it the same color as I'm painting. So if my line is not perfect, that's okay, because all you're gonna see is the trace that I did with the chalk pen. I try to kind of, I normally use the paint lid when I'm painting something, because then I don't have to worry about getting too much paint on my brush. I might also have a paper plate close by, and then I will just dab it, and then I will, do some X's and get rid of the excess onto the paper plate. Now, if you are left-handed, you're going to want to start on the other end. So you don't want to be painting the Y first and then come over and do the J, because your hand's going to get into it. So you kind of have to think about that. I'm thinking about that a little bit with the Vaseline, because I really don't want the Vaseline on my arm and then to be on something else. But and like I said, this is just pink, that pink tinted ceiling paint. So it might look pink, and then as it dries, it turns white. If you have stencils though, making a sign is super easy. And like I said, with the scrap wood, you can do signs. I use a lot of my scraps too, just to fix furniture, because I buy a lot of things that need love. I'm hoping tomorrow to finish up some Christmas shopping. I'm curious if you guys are ready or not. I feel like about half the people I asked, they still have not done hardly any shopping. And we had one Christmas last weekend. And then we're gonna have another one on Saturday, so it's kind of down to the wire. And the thing about paint, I don't get too nervous about it, because let's say I do a big mess up and I can't fix it. You can just paint the whole thing red again, or change colors and do the whole thing black and just start over. So it's the same on furniture too. If you paint something and you don't like it, then you just paint over it, start over. And what something looks like up close versus what something looks like when it's hanging on your wall and, farther away, it looks a lot better. Plus, when you're the one that does it, you're a little harder on yourself. So I try to go lightly, so I only have to do one coat or whatever. But you can see here I've got pretty good brush strokes. So I'd say it's going to need another layer. Last year for Christmas, my kids took some old barnwood and made signs for Christmas presents, and my daughter's wanting to do that again this year. So kind of like letting the kids color on the wrapping paper if you're using that craft paper. You can also let them make Christmas presents. We did some kind of farm saying, and I think we did one that's maybe said Johnson or Cardinals on it. And a neat trick that you might have seen here lately is you can take this sign, well, you couldn't this one, but you can write joy on one side, and then maybe you could write love for Valentine's Day or family or something on the other side. So making a lot of these holiday things reversible, and that way you can use them. You know, maybe it said fall on one side, and then you have Christmas, something merry or joy or something for Christmas on the other side. And I would say some of my brush strokes, like over here, you can tell that the paint's not wanting to stick because that's where the Vaseline is. And definitely want to make sure your red or whatever your base color is absolutely dry before you go back over it. Otherwise, you will have permanently pink letters. And like where you can see brush strokes, you can sand those out. Like if we do the Vaseline and the Vaseline doesn't cover it up well enough, or it's still obvious after we distress it with the Vaseline, you can go back in there and use sandpaper also. And then that sandpaper can kind of disguise where, you know, you have either one layer of paint or two layers of paint. That can kind of hide it. And you can also change this. You could add highlights with some black paint. You could add some little pieces of holly. It's kind of like you can always add more paint, but you can't take away, so start out with just a little bit. So while I'm finishing up this while, tell you our current family dilemma. So our dog keeps going to my mom's and eating her cats, and he just kills them and leaves them. He doesn't even like chew on them or anything. And he goes over there even though my dad yells at him, and we try and keep him here. And I mean, he stays at our house for the most part. But there are a couple vehicles that go by that he chases. One of them has deer antlers on the grill, and that's like enough to entice him to want to chase it, I guess. So anyway, so we have a shock collar, but the shock collar only works if you're out there standing and watching him. And, you know, we're not doing that all day. So we invested in, what would you call it? A portable electric fence. So it's not an underground one. It's not one that you bury, because I don't know, we decided that we didn't want that. My sister has this portable one, so she'll bring it with her up here when she comes to my mom's so that her dog's not on the road. But she lives in the city, so it like goes around the perimeter of her house and pretty much to her neighbor's house. So that's like all the dog's yard anyway. Well, at our house, I mean, literally the dog, because it's a 50-foot diameter. So the dog literally can't go anywhere, it seems like, because half of the diameter is the house. So, okay, well, he'll get used to it. It's bigger than his pen. But the thing is that when he has the collar on, he will not leave the deck. He's too scared to leave the deck. He'll leave the deck if I'm out there with him. But I was out there with him and I needed to go to my truck, which is outside of the perimeter. And Cummins just walks through it. He doesn't even run. He doesn't even sprint, take off. He doesn't cry when the thing's shocking him. He just walks with me and gets shocked the whole time. And then once you get so far, it doesn't shock you anymore. Well, it's a $300 thing, so it's not like we can spend $300 and not use it. And we can't return it now. So I don't know what we're gonna do. So I'm looking for some advice. How do I teach the dog to get off the deck but stay within the parameters? So I had to put up all these little flags, but I mean, I don't even think the dog knows where the flags are or even what the flags are for. So I don't know. Okay, that looks pretty good. And so stay tuned for when I get done and we put it on the blog, and then you can see what it looks like when I take my paper towel and I wipe off where the Vaseline is, and I can't wait to tell you. Rachel says she doesn't have much shopping left. Oh, but making, yeah. If you have to make a bunch of stuff, you are down to the wire right now. You feel like that with your goats? Your goats won't stay in their property, on your property? Well, I don't think you can get shock. Well, maybe you can get shock collars for goats. My son really would like a goat, but I don't know, something else to take care of. So any of you guys that have the dog, what do you even call it? Portable shocker. I would love to hear how you made it work for your animals. I think the hard thing is that he's already been how he is for 2 years, and so I don't know. I think it's a hard adjustment for him. So, oh, I got a phone call. Have a good day, guys. Bye bye.
I heard Doritos taste so good.
I don't know, they are pretty good. Yes!
What?
You have to use them with your cup.
I'm going to.
You're going to.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were like putting it in your mouth.
How was volleyball, honey?
Fine.
Yeah, do you want to?